Today, we're going to learn how you can create this particular sci-fi hub with a lot of detail really easily and really fast, right? All within Blender. So let's start right off. We're not going to delete our default cube. Instead, we're going to scale it up by something like 5, and then we're going to go to our modifiers and add in a subdivision surface modifier, and we're going to increase the levels all the way to 6 as well as the render all the way to 6, and then we're going to go to this drop down menu and hit apply. Now if you actually tab to go into edit mode, you'll see how it has a dense geometry. Well, what we're going to be doing is getting rid of the geometry in a different way. So we're going to tab to go into edit mode, make sure that we have face select on, and then hit X and limited dissolve. This by itself will give you this really cool pattern. So now all we have to do is tap I to inset, and in case insetting isn't working, tap I again and individual will get switched on. Make sure you hold down shift so that it decreases by very small increments and you have a smooth inset, and then just make sure that it's not too much and select. Now you can hit Alt E and select extrude faces along normals. When you do that, you can either push it in, and this by itself gives quite a cool effect, and you can use this in various regions. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit shift and just move it out by a little bit, something around this much. So now that we have this set up, we're going to create two materials for this particular cube. So we're going to go to the materials. We're going to keep the base material as is. We're going to hit a new material by hitting the plus button over here and then clicking new. Now we're going to call this as the outsides, and material, we're going to change this to the insides. Now we're going to make sure that we have outsides selected, and with all of the faces that are currently selected, we're going to hit assign. Now we're going to actually get into the shading part of this. So we're going to take the light, we're going to do Alt G to clear its location, and then just GX to grab it on the X-axis and just move it out. And with that, we're going to shift into our shaded viewport. So we're going to hit this button over here. We're going to click and drag from that joint to open a new window and change this to the shader editor. We're going to hit N to remove the side panel. Then we're going to select our cube and start off with the actual materials. So the first thing is that we want to add even more detail than is already present. So to do that, we're going to use my favorite Voronoi texture, and we're going to change it from Euclidean to Chebyshev, and then we're going to search for a color ramp just so that we have more control, and place the color into the factor and place the output of the color ramp into the roughness, and we'll also search for a bump node, place it down here, and place this color into the height, and place the normal into the normal of the principled BSDF. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to scale up the Voronoi texture, maybe something like 25, and see how it looks. So right now I think it's a little too random, so we're just going to decrease the randomness to maybe 0.4. So that gives another layer of detail to all of the panels, and with that we can go ahead and give it even more detail. So right now if we were to look at it from this particular view, we're going to see that there's one side that's going to be lit by the light and the other side that's dark. So let's actually take the light and just grab it a little bit more on the x-axis further away so that the light is much softer, and just increase the power to 10,000. Increase the radius, and that's fairly good. We'll also go to the world and just decrease the color all the way to black. Finally, we're going to go to our render properties, switch on bloom, make sure that we clamp it at 4 and decrease the intensity to 0.3, and also switch on screen space reflections. So now if you actually look at this, there's this nice shadowy area on the right, and we want some of the panels to actually light up over there. So in order to do that, we're going to be searching for a gradient texture, and we're also just going to hit Control T with the node wrangler switched on, or alternatively just add in the mapping and texture coordinate nodes. Now we're going to change the texture coordinate nodes from generated to camera so that as we rotate the object, the gradient doesn't change. And since we're doing that, let's add in the camera as well. So with this view right here, we can just hit Control Alt 0 to snap the camera to view. Then we can select the camera, go to the camera settings over here, go to viewport display, change passport out to 1, and change the focal length to something really small like 8. Then we can go ahead to the object properties and just fix all of these to the closest numbers. So we can change X to 0, Z to 0, and we can just pull the Y in till the entire sphere covers up our camera. So this seems to be a good enough distance. So now let's select our sphere again, and then just Control Shift click the gradient texture to see how the gradient is, and we can see exactly where it is. So let's search for a color ramp, or just duplicate by Shift D this particular color ramp, and then just bring the black in by a little bit and change it from linear to B-spline, and then just drag this in to about there. And along with that, let's just click this plus button to add in another marker and change this marker color also to black. So this just helps with like a really nice smooth transition, and we make sure that it's all black to the left. So now that we have this particular transition, we want only the areas that are white to actually have a few areas of this texture to be lit up. So we can use the same Voronoi texture to do that. So in order to do that, we're going to search for a mix RGB and change the type from mix to multiply. And we're going to change the factor all the way to 1. We're going to place the color of this color ramp into the second socket and the color from the Voronoi texture into the first socket. And we're also going to take this color ramp and just duplicate it and place it in between the Voronoi texture and the multiply node. So now we're going to take this color and place it into the emission. And then we're going to Control Shift click the principal BSDF so that we can actually see the effect of what's happening. So right now you can see that way too much is lit up. In fact, almost all of it is. So we're going to take this black slider and just slide it in till just a few panels are switched on. And apart from that, we're also going to go ahead and change the emission strength to something really high so that it starts glowing. So let's increase this to maybe 50. Right now, the color is just white, but we want it to be of different colors based on what we want. So we're going to search for another mix RGB node. We're going to place it right there and switch it to color and then change color 2 to whatever we want. So let's go with this nice sci-fi blue, put it all the way up and increase the factor all the way to 1. And in case you don't like it and you want it to be a little bit whiter, you can go ahead and decrease the factor as well. Or you could go ahead and just decrease the saturation in the actual color by itself. But for now, let's just go ahead with this. Now that we have that set up, we can just go ahead and start with the actual animation of this particular scene. So generally we'd move the camera around, but we don't want the camera to move because then we'd have to move the light source as well. We want the light to remain in one particular direction. So in order to do that, we're going to take this particular sphere and just keyframe that rotating around the z-axis. So let's make this a 20-second long animation. So we're going to change the end frame to 600 and also go to our output properties and change the frame rate to 30 frames per second. Once we have that set, we can go to frame 0 and hit I, location, rotation scale, or just the rotation is enough for this particular animation. Then we can go to frame 600 and then rotate it by hitting R, Z, so that it rotates only on the Z axis, and type 360, then hit I, rotation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit T, linear, so that it becomes a perfect loop. So right now, what we can see is that the right side is far too dark. So we could add a secondary light source on that side, but we'll do that after we actually add the background, because the background might add in some light as well. We're also going to change the base color of this particular sci-fi hub to a tiny bit of a bluish color. So we're just going to bring this up by a little bit. And now we can actually play with the insides. So right now the inside is the default material, which happens to be gray. So we can actually go to our materials, switch the insides, and then change the base color to whatever we feel like. And in this case, I'm going to go with this blue, have it really bright. For the insides, however, I will go ahead and decrease the roughness and increase the metallic all the way to 1. For the outsides as well, we can go ahead and just increase the metallicness by a little bit, maybe 0.8. So now let's take a look at the animation, and that looks all right for now. The lamp seems to be a little too bright, so we're going to go ahead and just increase the radius by a little bit, or we'll not increase the radius, we'll keep the radius at 8, and we'll just grab it on the x-axis and just move it back by a little bit more. So now let's go ahead and texture this background. So let's switch from object to world, and then search for the Voronoi texture, and then just Control Shift click the Voronoi texture so that we see what it currently looks like. So making sure that it's on the distance itself, we'll search for a color ramp and plug that in right there. So now we're going to go ahead and just decrease the white all the way down there so that there's just a few black spots. Let's keep the black up there and the white down there, and just increase the scale as well. So let's increase the scale to something like 50. Now, we don't want everything to be white and the stars to be black. We want it to be the other way around. So we're going to search for an invert node, and we're just going to place it after the color ramp. Now, again, I feel like there are a little bit too many stars. So we're going to go ahead and just decrease this even more, and even more stars will start disappearing. Once you're happy with the number of stars that there are, in case you want the size to be a little larger, you can go ahead and decrease the size over here. But I think this is how I like it. We can go ahead and actually start with coloring the stars. Right now all the stars are white, but I want the stars to be a little bit bluish. So in order to do that, we're going to search for a mix RGB, and we're going to search for a Voronoi texture. We're going to go ahead and search for a color ramp as well, and plug the color of the Voronoi texture into the factor of the color ramp. Just like this, the color is going to go into the factor, and now we're going to take the color of the color ramp and place that into the color 2, and then we're going to place this mix node after the invert node, and then we're going to change the type from mix to overlay, and we're going to increase the factor all the way to 1, and we're going to change this from linear to constant and select the colors that we want the stars to be. So we can keep one as completely white, we can keep another one as this nice bluish color, and then we can choose another marker, just add it in with that plus sign, and change the color to maybe yellowish color, and then we can go ahead and Control Shift click this overlay so that that goes into viewer node, and we can see that too many of the stars are yellow, very few are blue, but we want a majority of them to be blue. So we can go ahead and just decrease this over here, and more of it will become blue. So there you go. Maybe there's a little bit too many that are blue. We'll add in another color, maybe an orangish color. So let's just add that in. Maybe move this to the side and just change this to orangish color, pinkish color over there. So there we have our background. But now the thing is that the background doesn't move, but we want the background to move so that it appears like there's some change happening. So in order to do that, we can go all the way to our Voronoi texture and Control T with the node wrangler switched on. Remember, even the viewing nodes are all shortcuts with the node wrangler. So we can go ahead and rotate this on the Z axis. So in order to make sure that you're rotating it in the right direction, you've got to rotate it by very small increments so that you actually see the rotation happening. So if I move it to the plus, the entire background is moving to the right as well. So let's actually see which direction our sphere is moving in, and I believe that it is moving towards the right, so we should move the background towards the right as well. So let's go back to frame 0 and change the Z to 0 and hit I. Then make sure that we have the mapping node selected. Go to frame 600 and then type the Z value to be 360 and then hit I, and then go down here to the timeline T linear. So now when it actually rotates, it should move such that it makes sense with the direction of the planet or the sci-fi hub. However, I don't think it's correct, so we have to make sure that this is minus 360 and not plus 360. Minus 360 and then hit I. So yeah, this makes more sense. So now we have to get the background to actually bloom by a little bit. So in order to get the background to bloom a little bit, we're just going to place this overlay into the color from the overlay into the color of the background. So place that right here and then place the background into the surface. Along with that, we'll also just delete the viewer node, and then we're just going to increase the strength. Make sure that you don't increase the strength so that everything can be seen in the dark side of our sci-fi hub. So just decrease it to, or increase it to something like 10 and leave it as is. I also think that there are far too many stars, so we can again go back to our initial Voronoi and just decrease this far more, and most of the stars will disappear. So with that, you get this perfectly looping animation with a starry background as well. With this, you can go ahead and go to your output properties. Make sure you change the output folder to the same folder that you saved your blend file in, or wherever you want to save it. Change the file format to FFmpeg video, encoding, change the container to MPEG-4, and the output quality to perceptually lossless. Once you have that done, render animation. Hopefully you learned something cool from this video, and you can use this to make your own style animations. And there is a big announcement that I've already teased in a previous video, and I'm teasing once again. So until then, have fun with this and stay creative.